It's Friday, so it's time for our national town hall meeting with a guy I think of as America's senator, Senator Bernie Sanders. Although the good citizens of Vermont know that he works principally for them. Senator Sanders, welcome.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Great to have you. What's on your plate? What's on your mind?
Well, what's on my mind is, as I trust most people know, there's going to be a very important election on Tuesday. And that election will determine who controls the U.S. Senate and who controls the U.S. House and governor seats all over America. Obviously, as a senator from Vermont, I worry a lot about control over the Senate, which is now in Democratic hands, and I hope remains in Democratic hands. And I just hope a couple of things. What the pundits tell us, Tom, is that if there is a low turnout, it may well be the case that there'll be a low turnout, Republicans will gain control over the Senate. If there is a higher turnout, the odds are the Democrats will do okay and probably retain control. I hope very much that people will come out and vote, no matter what their point of view is. I think it is an international embarrassment if we fulfill what the pundits tell us will happen, is that 60% of the people will not vote and 80% of young people will not vote and 75-80% of low-income workers will not vote. I think it's hard to describe that system as a true democracy when so many people are not participating in it. And on top of that, what bothers me very, very much is there are some people who will vote and who will understand very much what is at stake here, and this is people like the Koch brothers and other billionaires. They think this election is very important. So you may have young people say, I don't have the time, I'm not going to vote. Meanwhile, the Koch brothers will spend some $400 million on this election because they think it's pretty important. They want to control the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives. So I hope people, think hard about what's going on in the country and how we can move forward. And I hope very much they get out to vote. There was, in my view, in what disturbs me also about the current campaign is that we have enormous problems facing this country, which almost never get discussed at all. The entire Republican campaign seems to be that a candidate voted with Obama 95% of the time, vote him out, vote her out, which is total nonsense. The issue is, how are we addressing the major issues facing our country? In fact, are we even discussing the major issues facing our country? The reality is that in today, as you and I chat about quite often, the most important domestic issue that we face is the middle class of the United States of America is disappearing. There was a study that just came out the other day from the Social Security Administration, and they report that last year, 39% of all American workers made less than $20,000 a year, and more than half made less than $30,000 a year. More than half made $30,000 a year. $30,000 is a tough income level to survive on with dignity. More than half of Americans made that little. Meanwhile, what we're also seeing is that some 95% of all new income being generated is going to the top 1%. So we're seeing a shrinking middle class. We're seeing more people living in poverty today than almost any time in American history. We're seeing young people who cannot afford to go to college or maybe are leaving college deeply in debt. We're seeing still, despite the modest gains of the Affordable Care Act, 40 million people having no health insurance at all, others paying high deductibles, high co-payments. We're seeing a world being severely impacted, and I know you've worked very hard on this issue with Leon DiCaprio, on climate change, and scientists telling us that we have a small window of opportunity to transform our energy system. And Tom, you told me, you hearing any discussion about these issues?
No, although we just yesterday released our third video narrated by Leonardo DiCaprio and me and written by me and a couple of other people. And it's over at greenworldrising.org, but it's the third one just came out yesterday.
Fantastic. Well, and congratulations. But here we are in the middle of a campaign, and people can have differences of opinions. How do we address the obscene level of income and wealth inequality? That's what we should be debating. How do we create millions of decent-paying jobs rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure? Well, how do you do that? We should be debating that. How do we end the embarrassment of the United States having the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. Should be debating that. Why is it that 40 years ago, people could go to great universities in America, like the University of California? You know what tuition was 40 years ago in the University of California, Tom?
Free.
Free! Young people won't believe that, but it was true. It was free. City University of New York, free. State colleges all over Vermont and America, almost free. And yet now people can't afford to go. 30 years ago, we led the world in terms of the percentages of our people who graduated college. Today, we're in 12th place. What does that mean in a highly competitive global economy? Why is it that in Germany, Scandinavia, college education is free? In this country, it's unaffordable. Shouldn't we be debating that issue? How come we spend far more than any other people on earth per capita on health care, and yet our health care outcomes are not particularly good? Should we be debating that issue? So my concern is that we are running, there is a campaign out there which focuses primarily on 30-second TV ads, which do not address the real issues facing the American people, do not enable us to kind of have the debate that we need to have so that this country moves forward rather than continuing to move backward.
Yeah.
Now, last point that I want to make is that one of the issues that I worry about is that if the Republicans gain control over the Senate, there's very little doubt in my mind that they will make an effort to cut Social Security. It was just a piece today in the Hill newspaper where Paul Ryan says, Paul Ryan is the chairman of the Budget Committee in the House, and he says very clearly that he wants to move forward with, quote-unquote, entitlement reforms. And I hope every listener out there or every viewer out there understands that when people talk about entitlement reform, what they are talking about are cuts in Social Security and Medicare. So at a time when so many of our people are struggling, at a time when the middle class is shrinking, what the Republicans would like to do is move aggressively to cut back on Social Security and Medicare. And that's what they did in their last budget. In the Ryan budget in the House, which was voted upon by the Republicans, they transformed Medicare from the program it is now into a voucher program. They didn't deal with Social Security, but I think this time around they want to take a bite out of the Social Security apple, which will probably mean a reduction in cost of living adjustments. As you know, just recently the Social Security Administration announced that there'll be a 1.7% increase for seniors and for disabled vets. To my mind, that is much too low, but it's based on a certain formula. If the Republicans get their way, they will change that formula, and that 1.7 will, in fact, go down. Yeah. So my message to folks is, A, let's get out and vote in large numbers. B, I understand, everybody understands, that there's a lot of disillusionment out there, there's a lot of demoralization. But the situation will not get better. It will get worse if we have the Republicans controlling the Senate and the House. And one of the issues that they will tackle and go after is cuts in Social Security and Medicare. They will go after cuts in nutrition programs and in education, and they will fight to give more tax breaks for the wealthiest people in this country who absolutely do not need them.
Yeah. 15 minutes past the hour. Senator Bernie Sanders with us for our national town hall meeting, Brunch with Bernie. The senator will be taking your calls right after the break. You can check out his website at sanders.senate.gov. He also has a substantial presence over on Facebook and Twitter. Easy to track him down. Put in Senator Sanders. We'll be right back with Senator Sanders.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You can also sign up for the Bernie Buzz, Bernie's newsletter, over at sanders.senate.gov. And welcome back. Ken in Loveland, Colorado. You're on the air with Senator Sanders. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV, by the way, on DirecTV.
Yes, thank you for all you do, both of you. But I just would like to ask how he would please ask people in Colorado to vote. We have a full mail-in ballot. We all have our ballots. We can either drop them off, and today's the last day to mail it in. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ken. In Colorado, Senator Mark Udall is running for re-election. And Mark is a lot more conservative than I am, I think it's fair to say, but I think he's a strong senator. And I hope very much that he gets reelected. And as Ken just said, in Colorado, that's one of the states where you have, unlike some other states, there is an effort there to increase voter turnout. And I think that in a democratic society, I would hope that folks remember that people fought and died to maintain American democracy. And I don't think it is too much to honor them, to honor the democratic heritage of this country, to cast a ballot and take it to the mailbox. I don't know that that's a super difficult effort. So I hope that people do vote in large numbers. The Colorado race is a very, very close race. And I would hope very much that Senator Udall is returned to office.
Today is the last day to return a ballot in Colorado. It's like things are kind of falling into play. Yesterday on Morning Edition on NPR, Mara Liasson, who is their national political correspondent, and I believe is a Republican. If she's not, she certainly leans that way. Basically trashed Udall's and said Cory Gardner has walked away from his personhood stuff and he's become a moderate. And it was basically an ad for Cory yesterday. And then today they did the same thing. They said, we're going to go into Colorado and interview a voter. And they interviewed a Republican who said, yep, I just sent in my ballot for Cory Gardner. And it was like 2 days in a row on NPR, and it played every single hour, both mornings, was a piece dissing.
Let me just reiterate one point. Obviously, what happens in Colorado and who the senator from Colorado is important to the people of Colorado. But this election is important to the people in 50 states of this country and to every single American. Because whether or not people like Mark Udall win or lose, whether Kay Hagan in North Carolina wins or loses, whether Mark Begich in Alaska wins or loses, whether Gene Shaheen in New Hampshire wins or loses, that will make the issue of who controls the United States Senate. Every one of these races could be the pivotal role as to which party controls the Senate. People say, well, what difference does it make? It makes all of the difference in the world. If you are, for example, concerned about raising the minimum wage, if the Republicans gain control of the United States Senate, the chairman of the relevant committee that deals with minimum wage will be Lamar Alexander of Tennessee. By the way, not the most conservative of Republicans. Lamar's point of view is we should do away with the concept of minimum wage, let alone he opposes raising the minimum wage. If you are concerned about climate change, and Tom, I know how hard you're working on this issue.
Yeah.
The chairman of the Environmental Committee, which has oversight for climate change issues, will likely, I'm not sure, but I believe it will be Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma, who wrote a book last year calling climate change a hoax. So what happens in Colorado is not only important for Colorado, it is important for the entire country. Which party controls the United States Senate is, in fact, a very big deal.
There you go. We'll be right back. Thom Hartmann here with you, 20 minutes past the hour. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders on the line with us, taking your calls in our National Town Hall meeting. George in Albert Lee, Minnesota. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator Sanders. I've always wanted to ask you, you call yourself a socialist. Does that mean you believe in government ownership of, like, steel mills and airlines and railroads and stuff like that?
No, what it means, George, and thank you for the question, it means taking a hard look at countries where social democracy has, in fact, been very, very successful. And those are countries like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, who over the years have had social democratic countries. And this is what they have accomplished in those countries. What they have accomplished is that all people in those countries have health care as a right. So they go to the doctor whenever they want, and certainly in Denmark, there is no out-of-pocket expense. What they have accomplished is that higher education is free. So you go to college, you go to graduate school, you go to medical school, it is free. What they have accomplished in that country is bringing down childhood poverty to a level that is far, far, far lower than it is in the United States. Here in America, it's, I think, 18, 19%. In those countries, it's 3 or 4%. And that is huge. That means that children, when they're born, have a lot better opportunity to get a good education and make it into the middle class. In countries like Denmark, the minimum wage is more than double of what it is here in the United States, and their middle class is a lot stronger. They have a lot less income and wealth inequality. So I think what my vision is to have a government not dominated by the billionaire class or corporate America, where so many of the members of Congress end up working day and night for the top 1% rather than working families, but a government which, in fact, is responsive to the needs of ordinary people. So I think what you're talking about, George, is a mixed economy. No one would suggest that in Denmark or Finland or Sweden, all of their industry is owned by the government. In some cases, some of it may be. But you want an economy in which ordinary people have a fair shake, which is not simply dominated by the top 1%.
Rudy in Riverside, Illinois. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yeah. Senator Sanders, are there enough righteous persons in the Congress and the Senate to legislate Citizens United out of existence? The billionaire Republican running in Illinois for governor will seek to eliminate senior citizens' free property tax benefit. We must put an end to these people somehow, and we knew a new Magna Carta, like the nobility, removed Prince John.
Well, Rudy, good question. Many people may not know it because it did not get a whole lot of attention. But in terms of the question that Rudy is asking, which is an enormously important issue, in fact, probably the most important domestic issue that we face, and that is, do we continue to have a political process given to us by a 5-4 Supreme Court vote on Citizens United, which enables corporations and billionaires to spend as much money as they want on elections? And Rudy says, are there enough, quote-unquote, righteous souls in the Congress to overturn that? Well, what I could tell you, Rudy, is that when Congress was about to leave for the election break, there was a vote on this issue on the floor of the Senate. And every member of the Democratic caucus voted to proceed for a constitutional amendment which would overturn Citizens United and allow the federal government, allow Congress and states and municipalities to impose campaign finance limitations. Unfortunately, to the best of my memory, we did not get in the Senate one Republican to support us. So to answer your question, I think right now the Republicans not only support Citizens United, they want to go further. If you talk to the chairman of the Republican Party today, Mr. Priebus, what he will tell you is that he wants to remove all campaign finance restrictions, meaning that billionaires like the Koch brothers can hand checks directly to candidates all over this country, which essentially means they will own those candidates. They will be employees of the Koch brothers. So they want to go even further than Citizens United. But I agree with Rudy that we have got to overturn Citizens United, and we've got to rally the American people to do that.
Okay. Ann, listening to KBAI in Bellingham, Washington. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate both you, Tom, and Senator Sanders. He kind of hit on what I was going to say, but I am appalled at the Supreme Court all the way down to the county courts. I just find them to be corrupt, and what can we do about it?
Well, I am, not familiar with decisions made by county courts around the country, but I am familiar with decisions made by the United States Supreme Court. And what should upset every American is if you think back to the Gore-Bush election, a Supreme Court decision was made in a very political way, I think. I think it was a terrible decision, which gave the election to George W. Bush. And then 4 years ago, we had a Supreme Court decision, again, by a 5-4 vote, which essentially allowed billionaires to spend as much money as they want in elections, something supported and pushed by the Republican Party. So I think, Ann, what you have right now is an extremely politicized court. And I would contrast that, and this wasn't my observation, but somebody pointed out that back in 1954, when there was an extraordinarily important Supreme Court decision called Brown versus Board of Education. Tom, you remember the significance of that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was desegregated schools. You know what the vote was on that?
It was unanimous, wasn't it?
9-0.
Yeah.
Because the Supreme Court understood that on a decision of that magnitude, they had to show the American people unanimity. It wasn't the 5-4 vote like on Citizens United.
There you go. Senator Bernie Sanders. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Be sure to check out Bernie's website, sanders.senate.gov, and go over to Facebook and plug his name in. Check out his Facebook page as well. We'll be back. Welcome back to the place where despair is not an option. Get out there, get active. Thom Hartmann with you. It is our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders taking your calls in our national town hall meeting. And Daniel in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Tom, Senator Sanders. Thank you so much for what you both do. In 2010, the Republicans locked on to Speaker Pelosi, and they got her. Now they're locking on to Majority Leader Reid, and now they're going to try and get him. Why aren't we talking and bringing to the forefront the Speaker Boehner agenda, how the laws that he's tried to stop and how he essentially is not allowing us to stop China from cheating on trade? Senator Sanders, you know that the Democratic Senate supported legislation to make sure that the Chinese are held accountable, and it went to Boehner, and he did nothing. I mean, with the middle class, these races in Iowa and North Carolina, it's like this didn't happen or anything like that. Why aren't we let these people know about it? And I really appreciate everything you guys do. Thank you so much.
Well, Daniel, thanks very much for your question. And you raised a very important issue. And that is, in my view, for a wide variety of reasons, having a lot to do with corporate control over the media. Most Americans do not only not know what's going on in terms of trade or sanctions against China, they don't know very much about anything. The irony of this, and let me just pick up on Daniel's point, one of the concerns that many Americans have is that over the last 14 or 15 years, we've lost some 60,000 factories in America. 60,000 factories in America. And that means millions of decent-paying jobs. And there are a number of reasons for that loss in manufacturing. But an important one is our disastrous trade policies. That's NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, which has said to corporations in America, yeah, of course, you can shut down here in this country. You can throw millions of people out of work. Hey, you can go to China, and you can pay people $1 an hour, and you can bring those products back in America. Of course. Why not? What's the problem? Now, to my mind, as someone who voted against all of these agreements, I think that's a disaster. But I think the point that Daniel is making is we don't discuss that issue. I want people to think 60,000 factories shut down in the last 15 years. How much discussion have you seen on television about our disastrous trade policy, which, by the way, is not just the fault of Republicans. Democrats were there, too. Corporate America wanted unfettered free trade with China. That's what we got. It's a disaster. But Daniel asked appropriately, how much discussion do we have? But it's not just unfettered free trade. It is important issue after important issue. How many people out there are going to go to the polls on Tuesday who believe not only that we should not cut Social Security, but we should expand Social Security, who are going to be voting for Republican candidates who want to cut Social Security, who want to cut Medicare? How many people know that? They don't. Because if you turn on the television, what you're going to hear is candidate X voted for Obama 238% of the time. But you don't know what these guys stand for. What do they want to do? And as I mentioned a moment ago, Paul Ryan, who is one of the influential Republicans in the House, chairman of their budget committee, says it. Today's paper, The Hill. Basically what he is saying is that he wants to go after entitlement reforms. That is a code phrase for cutting Social Security and Medicare. So if you want to cut Social Security and Medicare, go ahead. That's fine. Vote for Republican candidates. If you don't, you might want to think otherwise.
There you go. Barry in Sarasota, Florida. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Well, hiya, Bernie. It's so nice to talk to the next president of the United States. First of all, I would like to say that I'm very dismayed that when I watch all the debates on C-SPAN, et cetera, that the Democratic candidates don't say anything what you're saying. I don't see Obama saying what you're saying. I don't see Democratic ads saying anything that you're saying. And the second point is people may not be voting because Obama promised to label GMOs. And what did he do? He didn't do it. Instead, he put Monsanto in charge of the FDA. So broken promises make people not want to vote. And the third thing I just want to say is you talked about corporations controlling media. 55 years ago, corporations were controlling quiz shows. Do you remember the quiz show scandals?
Yep.
And that was a big deal in Congress. Well, now we have corporations controlling the media, preventing our democracy. Why don't we have investigations into that the way we did 55 years ago? So thank you for letting me air out my point.
And thank you for your very good and salient observations. Well, I have to kind of agree with you. I think one of the reasons that the Democrats are struggling is they are by no means, with some exceptions out there, standing up and fighting vigorously for the rights of working families. They are too often on the defensive. They are too often running away from the need to take on the big money interest. And the answer, and the reason for that, is that too many campaign contributions for Democrats also come from big money interest. But I think, and what I would say to Barry is that if you talk to people in Vermont or all over this country and you look at the polling, the interesting point is that the vast majority of the American people on most issues believe in a progressive agenda. Let me just give you a few examples. When you do a poll and you say to the American people, what's the most important issue facing you? Invariably, they say it is the economy and jobs. And then you say to them, do you think the federal government should invest in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure and create millions of decent-paying jobs? And what the people of this country say, yes, whether they're progressive, moderate, conservative, they understand we need to create decent-paying jobs in America, and by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, rail, older schools, we make the country more productive. When you ask the American people, should we raise the minimum wage above the starvation wage of $7.25 an hour? You know what the American people say? Overwhelming. Yes, we've got to do it. When you ask the American people, should women continue to make 77 cents on the dollar compared to men workers, they say no, we need pay equity. When you ask the American people, should we create a trade policy which protects the needs of workers rather than corporations, they say yes, we should. When you ask the American people, should we deal with the obscene level of income and wealth inequality and ask the rich to stop paying their fair share of taxes, the American people say, yeah, we should. When you ask about global warming, the American people say, yes, we've got to move to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. So on all of these issues, by and large, the American people are pretty united. They want us to move forward. And it does disturb me, as the caller just indicated, that too many Democrats are not prepared to stand up and come forward with an agenda that speaks to the needs of the middle class and, in fact, is prepared to take on the oligarchy, which increasingly controls our political and economic life.
Charles in Opelika, Florida. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, good afternoon, Senator Sanders, and good afternoon, Tom.
Hey.
Love your show.
Thank you.
This is a very serious election that's coming up right now. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of disappointed in the Democrats I haven't heard anything about the fuss that has to be made about the Republicans shutting down the House. Shutting down the government. They shut down the government. We had a sequester. The sequester actually has helped as far as starting this debate that the president and this administration has taken the lead with the CDC on funding these hospitals with at least the proper direction on taking care of this crisis with the Ebola. Let's not forget, once they took the funding from the CDC, there wasn't there's some things that the CDC can't, and once you do these, once they did that, they've started up a phony debate that we're not actually.
So, Charles, what's the question for Senator Sanders?
Well, the question is, why aren't the Democrats talking about these issues more?
There you go.
Is that right, Charles? I think that's the question.
Yeah, Charles is gone. I'm sorry.
It's the same question in the sense that I think was Barry just asked a moment ago. And I agree that, in fact, to a significant degree, the Democrats have really not held the Republican record accountable. And these are guys who said, well, unless you end the Affordable Care Act, we're going to shut down the government. We don't care. Oh, well, the Affordable Care Act has provided health insurance for some 10 million more people, 10 million more Americans. Well, we don't care about that. We're going to shut down the government unless you repeal that, unless you cut programs that should not be cut. I think, what the Republicans have successfully done, and there are a lot of reasons why they've been able to accomplish that in this campaign, is run away from their record. What do the Republicans propose to do about tax reform? Well, their goal is to give more tax breaks for the wealthy and large corporations. That's what they propose to do. Do most Americans think that is a good idea? What do they propose to do about strengthening Social Security and expanding it? Well, they want to cut Social Security benefits. What do they want to do about Medicare? They want to end Medicare as we know it and convert it into a voucher program, which will give seniors a check for perhaps $8,000 to then go out to a private insurance company to get the care they need, which, if you're sick, will be virtually useless. So it is important, as Charles talks about, to demand that the Republicans tell us what they want to do rather than just attacking Obama all of the time.
We'll be back with more of your calls for Bernie in our Brunch with Bernie Hour. Senator Sanders with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie Hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, 15 minutes before the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And be sure to check out Bernie's website, sanders.senate.gov. You can sign up for the Bernie Buzz. You could also check out his Facebook page. And welcome back. Jim, watching Free Speech TV on Direct TV in Lockport, Illinois. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator Sanders, how are you?
Good.
My question to you is this. With all the campaigning going on, I'm a little bit dismayed why the Democrats haven't been out there touting the 55 months of private sector job growth. Now, do people in this country really want to go back to the recession?
Well, Jim, that's a great question, and I think you're right again. What we're hearing here, Tom, from a number of callers,
it's a theme.
Is disappointment in the Democratic campaign.
Yeah.
And what Jim is saying is very important, and here's what it's about. Thanks for the question, Jim. Is the economy anywhere near where we want it to be today? And the answer is no, it's not. No one thinks that it is. Real unemployment is much, much too high. It's much higher than the official unemployment. Wages are much, much too low. Poverty is much too high. Wealth and income inequality is obscene. That's a fact. But what Jim says is, hey, okay, we're not where we want to be. Take a look at where we were 6 years ago. And let's take a look at where we were 6 years ago. Today, and Jim makes the point that there's been job growth for the last 55 months or so. It's been modest, that's true. But compared to where we were when Bush left office, we were losing over 700,000 jobs a month. That is beyond belief. that is almost unprecedented in modern American history. 700,000 jobs a month. We were in the worst economic recession since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Even more frightening, the financial system in the United States and internationally was on the verge of collapse, i.e. you put your ATM card into, you put your credit card into an ATM machine, nothing comes out. You may not have a banking system because the Bush administration forgot to look at what was going on at Wall Street in terms of their recklessness and their greed and their illegal behavior. So the financial system was on the verge of collapse. Republicans worry about the deficit. Well, you know what? In Bush's last year, the deficit was $1.4 trillion. I believe that's the highest in American history. Today, it is well below half of that. We were in 2 wars 6 years ago where American combat troops were getting killed every week. They're not there now. So the point is, are we where we want to be in the economy today? Absolutely not. Do we need bold and aggressive actions to rebuild the crumbling middle class? Yes, we do. Should we criticize Obama for not being aggressive enough, for not standing up to the Republicans more forcefully? Yes, we should. But do you really want to go back to the trickle-down economic theories of Bush 6 years ago, which left this country on the verge of economic collapse, i.e., if the financial system went under? You're talking about perhaps the worst depression in modern world history. So I think Jim asked that question. And the Republicans, by the way, that is their philosophy. Their philosophy is trickle-down economic theory. What is good for the billionaires and what is good for large multinational corporations is presumably good for everybody. That is a false theory. That is quackery. So I would hope that we do not go back to the ideas that plunged this country into such serious problems 6 years ago.
George Herbert Walker Bush called it voodoo economics.
And George Herbert Walker Bush was absolutely correct.
Indeed. Senator Bernie Sanders with us answering your questions in our National Town Hall meeting, Brunch with Bernie. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Bernie. Before the hour, defending America from the weapons of mass deception. Thom Hartmann here with you and Senator Bernie Sanders on the line. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. And Josh in Memphis, Tennessee. You are on the air with Senator Sanders. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM, Josh.
Thank you, Tom. How you doing, Senator Sanders?
Good.
This is my first time ever calling into your show, but I've been a listener for years.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a question about the actual VA. I know you work with the VA, Mr. Sanders.
Yes.
I was a veteran of 9.5 years. I did 6 years active duty, and my mother got sick, so I joined the National Guard, and I came back to miss it, and I continued to serve in the National Guard. Well, I had ailments when I got out, so I'm a disabled vet, and I was wondering, why does the VA separate your active time from your National Guard time, even though I didn't have any break in service? They don't count it the same. I was trying to see, why is that?
That's a good question, Josh. Are you having trouble getting into the VA right now?
I have, well, they look at some of my claims as being some from when I was active duty, and then some that because I've been on several deployments overseas, and then several.
Well, Josh, depending upon your income today, you should be able to get into the VA. If you want to call my office, we can make a call to see what's going on. So just call my office in Washington, and we will see if we can help you straighten this out.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Josh, thank you for the call. Chris in Las Vegas, Nevada. Hey, Chris, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hey, Senator Sanders, it's a pleasure to speak with you. Tom had reported earlier in the week that you had an insane rep, Jason Chavez. He was asking, why isn't President Obama, using the Surgeon General? That guy should be qualified to take care of this Ebola problem. And Tom had mentioned that, that Senate Republicans have been filibustering this Vivek Murphy guy. When are we going to change these insane Senate filibuster rules? And are you working to change this? I know Harry Reid kind of talked about it, but then backed away. I mean, because this is just insane. 51.
Okay, good question. Got it.
Yeah.
And the answer is we have changed the rules. Here's what, again, Tom, a lot of people don't understand. You know, they get angry for Democrats, and sometimes for very good reasons, as we heard this afternoon. But sometimes people just don't know the way the Senate runs. Now, for example, people will be surprised to know that a majority of people in the United States Senate voted to raise the minimum wage, move toward overturning this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decisions, voted for pay equity for women workers, voted to do away with a variety of huge tax loopholes that large corporations enjoy, and many, many other important provisions. A majority of senators voted for that. But we can't pass it because the Republicans have filibustered, and require 60 votes for almost every major piece of legislation. They've used the filibuster hundreds and hundreds of times since Harry Reid has been majority leader. Now, the caller says, well, what about nominations, like for the Surgeon General? In fact, we did change the rules on that, and we went from 60 votes to majority vote. The result of that has been dozens and dozens and dozens of judges and nominees finally getting approved with majority vote rather than waiting forever to get 60 votes. The Republicans were filibustering virtually every nominee, no matter how relatively unimportant that nominee, might be. So the rules were changed, and I hope we'll get more nominees appointed.
Donald in Chicago, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yes, hi. How you doing there, Tom? Nice to talk to you, Senator Sanders. I got a question. If the Republicans take the Senate and they have the House, and they go after Social Security, what could President Obama do? If anything, what will Hillary Clinton do if she gets elected? Won't she be like a lame duck president where nothing's going to be able to get done? Can we fight these people then?
Well, the president has the veto pen, and I would hope and expect that if the Republicans attempted to cut Social Security, he would veto it. But here's the problem, Donald. My Republican colleagues are not dumb, and they understand the legislative process pretty well. So what you can do is create a situation where you put cuts in Social Security, which is what I expect that they would do, in with other provisions, like the budget. So that if the president vetoes it, they will say, well, the president is shutting down the government, or putting in cuts to Social Security with other important provisions that the American people want. So you can come up with a legislative package that makes it difficult for the president to protect those people who need protecting. That's what my fear is. But mark my words, and I certainly hope the Republicans do not gain control of the Senate. If they do, expect them to move aggressively to cut Social Security, to cut Medicare, to cut Medicaid, to give huge tax breaks to the wealthy and large corporations. That is their DNA. That has been what they have wanted to do for many years. If they gain control of the Senate, they'll be in a better position to do that.
Senator, just 1 minute left. Your final thoughts for the week?
Well, my final thoughts for the week is that I hope very much that in our democracy, which people fought and died to defend, the American people do not fulfill the predictions of the political scientists and the pundits who tell us that the majority of people are not going to vote, that the vast majority of young people are not going to vote, that the vast majority of low-income working people are not going to vote. This is an enormously important election, and it is terribly important that people send in their ballots if they're voting by mail, or just make sure they get down to the polling booth on Tuesday. And I think if we do that, I think the results will be better than people are anticipating.
And actually, there's some indications polling or the early voting indications look actually pretty good for the Democrats. We'll see where it goes.
Yes, we will.
Senator Sanders.
That next week.
Indeed, we will. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Okay.
And all these years, Senator Bernie Sanders. Be sure to check out his website at sanders.senate.gov. You can check out his Facebook page. Just plug Bernie Sanders into Facebook, and you will have it.